We are live.
Hello and welcome to our ISE Fireside Webinar. We are thrilled to have eShare as our sponsor today, and our topic being Secure Collaboration Begins with Secure Email. A couple of housekeeping things for all of us as we get started today. You will be able to earn 1 CPE credit for joining us today, but you must participate to the webinar in its completion. And there'll be a survey that will be shown in the window, in the chat window, I should say, at the end of the session today. If you will enter your CPE number, we will send you the certification information so you can make that deposit into your CPE account. We also will have a Q&A session today. At the end of the session, we ask, as you think about those questions, to enter that information into the Q&A chat window. But we will be answering those questions at the end of the webinar today. So we've got a great session with you today, and we will kick off with our panelist introductions. We'll also hear from eShare, who is our sponsor. And then we will also jump into our panel discussion. We've got some really great hot topics underneath our leadership topic here. And then we'll jump into the Q&A session and sign off at 2:45. So, gentlemen, thank you again for joining us today. I'd like to have you introduce yourselves. And Chuck, would you go ahead and say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Chuck Deaton. I am Chief Information Security Officer at Humana Edge. I've been with Humana for about 18 years, and we're headquartered out of Louisville, Kentucky in the health and wellness space.
Thanks. It's nice to see you. It's been a long time.
It has.
Patrick, hello, and thanks for joining us today. It's been a while since we've gotten together. Could you introduce yourself to everybody today?
Sure, absolutely. Hello and welcome everyone. So Patrick Sullivan, so I head of security operations for Refinitiv. Refinitiv, we power and advance the financial community. We provide various products and services across trading, wealth and advisory, risk, wealth, and enterprise data in over 190 countries around the globe.
Thank you, Patrick. And Nick, would you say hello and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Nick Stamos. I'm the founder and CEO of eShare. This is my 4th startup that I've done over the years. eShare is really focused on enabling collaboration, responsible, secure collaboration across any sort of boundaries, any sort of countries, any sort of organizations in terms of what's there. So simple and frictionless capabilities. We're really focused on enabling corporations as they embrace O365 and G Suite, and especially during this pandemic these days, for the work from home culture, to take advantage of all of the efficiencies in today's sort of link-based technologies. We're transitioning from a file-based technology to link-based technology so that you have version history and co-authoring and all those wonderful benefits that you get as folks transition for that. Typically, that's only within the boundaries of an organization because of security concerns and reliability issues. We're providing and extending that outside corporate boundaries for your customers, your business partners, your supply chain, so on and so forth, in a way that's easy and reliable. And probably most differentiated is that we're doing it as an extension to your existing platform. We're not providing these capabilities as a separate, independent platform, but really as an extension to G Suite, as an extension to Office 365, to OneDrive, to SharePoint, to Teams, and so on and so forth, so that we sort of enable companies that have disabled external sharing from those platforms to enable it and gain true and full value of what they've paid for. And finally, to allow companies to save a lot of money in these days of the pandemic and sort of saving cash. There are a myriad of different tools that are people running for external sharing that are quite expensive, and being able to consolidate into an Office or a G Suite platform, you can save quite a bit of money by eliminating third-party tools that folks may have that are quite expensive and in fact add on. So things like Box or Smartsheets or other platforms that are hundreds of dollars per user per year can be consolidated into your O365 platform. So and email, of course, which we're going to talk about today, is part of our multi-channel strategy, so that no matter how your users are working, whether they're working on OneDrive or Google Drive, or Teams, or email, or whatever the case may be, we've got a solution to facilitate sort of this next generation collaboration outside your corporate boundaries.
Thank you very much, Nick, for the introduction of eShare. We again appreciate your partnership with us. And gentlemen, let's go on and start our discussions. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
All right, well, our first topic today is file sharing and content collaboration, the current state. Despite organizations needing to protect sensitive information from cyber attackers, they also really need to share information with clients and partners and suppliers and conduct business. And we've really learned a lot of that now on a remote work basis. Users are still getting their jobs done, but they're working around some of the limitations around file sharing and collaboration tools that have been presented to them. In highly regulated businesses such as Patrick's and Chuck's Industries, raises a lot of concerns around around compliance and our employees sharing information with each other or partners, and customers that might be in violation of the security guidelines, as well as different compliance regulatory requirements. With that said, I'm going to ask Chuck, your healthcare Humana as a healthcare provider. Tell us a little bit about the external file sharing generally done at Humana, and what is the top tool that you might be using for your employees, and how did the security team kind of pick that out and place the shared files, and how are you kind of monitoring that litmus test to see if everything's working appropriately for you guys?
Well, I would say it's probably fair to say that it's fairly ad hoc or disjointed, may be a good word to say. It's kind of a, one might even say it's a hot mess. And when it comes to your workforce trying to share information, especially files and folders and videos and all the kinds of different file formats that we have today with the outside world. And in a lot of cases, we have what I would consider too many capabilities. That may sound odd, but it seems like we're really good as companies adding capabilities, but we're not very good at taking any away. So as the general workforce experiences with their laptops or desktop PCs, they experience this ever increasing complexity of options, and it gets so convoluted that they lose their way in what is the best thing to do. Now, from a security standpoint, we see what goes in and out of the company in varying degrees of technical detail, and it's clear that email and email attachment is the #1 volume egress path for the average workforce population, and right behind that is web protocols, browser-based HTTP and HTTPS uploads, file transfer uploads to external destinations, and then third behind that is file transfer protocol tools, FTP, secure FTP, those kind of things. And then coming in behind that is everything else, including file sharing. What we've had to do, though, in the regulatory pressure that we're under in healthcare, is we've had to cripple the file sharing capabilities. The OneDrives, the Dropboxes, the boxes, those things are heavily filtered, heavily monitored, and heavily blocked, at least in one direction, right? Outbound, maybe we allow them inbound, but we don't allow them outbound. And again, that just adds to the complexity and the frustration of your average user who really needs to get something done and to get things out. So they default to what they know best, which happens to be email. And then they run into us kind and good-hearted security people who have all kinds of limitations on email. We cap the file sizes, we cap the file types, we content inspect, we classify, we reroute, we quarantine, we block, we send them nasty ground messages to say, you've tried to do something bad and we stopped you. So it's a gauntlet for the end user, and my sympathies go out to them, and I work diligently with vendors like Nick, and also internal executive stakeholders on the business and IT to see if we can't deliver something better. And that's really why we're here and what we're talking about today.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Patrick, I'd like to take a question over to you. what do you think is most concerning about external file sharing and collaboration from a head of security operations perspective? And, you know, I'd love to get your thoughts on what security risks do you feel the most pressure to mitigate on behalf of business, and what are your compliance concerns?
Yeah, I think just to echo a lot of what Chuck had just talked about, I think it's complexity, you know, on the users. I think first and most importantly, because if it's overly difficult and complex, users naturally are going to find easier way to do things and circumvent the various security controls that you put in place. And I think on sort of the control and security side, it's everything from governance, where we have, you know, certain data requirements for the likes of GDPR and regulated data sets. It's trust and kind of the integrity of the data, you know, maintaining who should have access, you know, the abilities to grant and revoke access as things change, users leave the company, and so on. And really unintentional sharing, so kind of the data loss prevention risks that come with data. So, you know, we leverage a lot of tools like eShare, as well as some of the capabilities with O365 to try to get our arms around some of those problems and you know, security controls.
And Nick, what do you think about the role of email? Everyone here has talked about the importance of email. I mean, we email each other all the time, but do you see it really in regards to file sharing? And, you know, what do you think companies should be thinking about in terms of encouraging or discouraging file sharing through email? And just love to get your thoughts on, you know, the capabilities and limitations out there of doing so, and what businesses might be having to do to protect, you know, their unstructured data. Oh, we can't hear you, Nick. You got us on mute.
Sorry. A lot of this comes down to people sort of evolving their thinking, as I did. My last company was a company called Digital Guardian, which we built and started sort of the whole DLP sector, preventing data from leaving. So one of our arch enemies was email, right? Because email was a great path to let sort of information flow out of the company accidentally or on purpose, or so on and so forth. And we've seen a whole bunch of different tools sort of come up and be available to users. Probably most predominant is this Teams, for example, right? In terms of what's there and trying to get people to communicate in that fashion. But no matter what we're seeing in the real world is that it's very difficult. You can give, as Chuck was saying, you can give users a lot of different options, a lot of different tools. You can't make them use something. And what we're seeing is because email is always there and it always works, and no matter how much people complain, it's still at their fingertips, no matter where they are, no matter what they're doing, no matter what the application is. It's commonly used. And one of our clients, in fact, talked about their, you know, all of their users having a muscle memory, right? No matter what tool they give them, the user will eventually, you know, attach the document to an email and send it to sort of the outside world. And so part of our thinking and our strategy is, well, why change, right? Why change what people are doing? Why not leverage it? Why not use technology and use platforms like O365 that have a lot of sort of wonderful capabilities and integration capabilities well beyond anything other experienced previously, to rethink the whole concept of email. And maybe it's not the user's responsibility to worry about how they want to send something or whether it should be secure or not, but maybe the systems in the back end can automatically, right, use email as a starting mechanism, but then apply the appropriate controls and make the appropriate changes in a way where the user doesn't have to necessarily even be aware that they have to do something. And the technology has gotten to the point where we can really rethink email and take it to the point where we're not discouraging people from using email, but actually encouraging them from using it with the appropriate controls. Thinking alone of the fact that, for example, with O365, you can have attachment size up to 150 megabytes per email. So what if, right, if you had this magic technology that could, you know, take attachments and strip them out and secure them and still let the email sort of go through to the endpoint, that would then allow large files to be transferred through email to people outside your organization as well as internally, why not leverage that as a zero training, zero effort, you know, relatively low cost capability, where you don't have to train users to do anything. If anything, encourage them to use it more because they're already doing it. It doesn't cost you much more because you're not paying for storage anymore for O365. And so suddenly you have a file transfer utility that's secure, that's easy to use, that's next generation in terms of linking technologies and co-authoring and so on and so forth, without any end user behavior. And that's the most expensive part of any solution, is the adoption process and getting your users to use it. And that's why we think it's a perfect sort of approach to not force change on the user, but make all the changes in the back end and let the user just keep on doing what they like to do.
That's the perfect segue for us to transition to our next topic, is secure email, the current state. So kind of to summarize a little bit what you said, Nick, really typical secure email treats both the attachment and the body of the email essentially the same. So placing, the vendor supplied portal behind a password, and really the results become oversimplified. So love to get your thoughts about what risk could that email attachment pose to an organization or its recipients, and what about the risk of the body of the email itself, and how would someone go about evaluating and remediating some of these risks differently? Because as we know, one size doesn't all fit all. Some of these risks are ancillary and some are very sophisticated, and what's the fallout here?
For me?
Yes.
Sure. So one of the things that we have to remember, that the traditional secure mail solution was meant for compliance. It was never meant for security in terms of what's there. And so these secure mail solutions, and they were not meant to be convenient or frequently used, because if they were, why wouldn't everything be a secure mail, right, in terms of what's there? And so the reality is, although they may secure the transport of the data, usually by just not letting it leave, and I'll credit Chuck Deaton for this wonderful quote that he has. It's hostage-based security, right? They keep your data hostage in a portal platform, but when you go into the portal, you can download it, you can sort of do whatever you want, right, within that environment. So they're not really providing great security controls, and they're legacy-based, and they don't really evolve in terms of ease of use. And so that's sort of where, if you rethink it in terms of how do we not look at it as a compliance tool, but really look at it as a collaboration platform, which is beyond just email, and applying it to the pieces of data that are relevant. Many times, sort of the offending piece of data in an email is the attachment. The body, sometimes, many times, doesn't have any sort of sensitive content. It's the attachment that does. So why put the attachment and the body, through a protection mechanism that forces the user to have to, go to a portal, do sort of whatever they have to do? Why not allow users to interact back and forth through normal email and just protect the attachments as links, right? And then apply the appropriate controls when they have to view the links. The next part is, why not, give the user the full experience where they can view the document, but they don't have to download to view the document. Many times in a lot of these solutions, in order to view the attachment, you have to download the document to the endpoint, which now exposes it to whatever that endpoint is. Why not have a viewer built into it, so you click on the link and you view the document itself? We found, for example, at eShare, that even when people had the ability and the privilege to download a document, it was only downloaded less than 10% of the time, because people don't really care about downloading it. They just want to view it, they want to search it, they want to edit it, they want to call it a day in terms of what's there. So I think there's an ability to sort of rethink the whole email strategy, from that of providing compliance to that of being secure collaboration, which will incidentally provide compliance as well.
So Patrick, what about the workarounds affecting data governance and protection within your organization? And is there really some limitations overall to secure email? What are users sort of saying about this process? Do they like it?
So, just so I understand, what are users saying about some of the challenges with secure email and so on?
Yeah, and then have they found some workarounds, and how does that work when you're in a regulated industry such as yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some of the challenges that have been highlighted. So the limit on file size with emails, offline access. There's a number of valid use cases that often make secure email solutions difficult. And in the absence of those, our employees and users still need to get their jobs done, and they can and will find workarounds. So that's why I think it's important that we provide them with the best and usable secure solutions that we can. And I think that's some of the benefits of eShare and so on, where it enables that as Nick mentioned, the ability to manipulate a file in real time, to collaborate. It's not necessarily always has to be downloaded, so you can get controls, in environments where it's offline or sent outside of your company. So I think that's a lot of the main use cases that we've seen for the tool thus far.
So Chuck, I'd love to get your thoughts. Is adoption been an issue for you guys? I know as a Humana customer, and we get a lot of great information from all of you, but I know to get to that information sharing with us on, best practices around healthcare out there, there's a lot of collaboration that has to take place inside the organization. And as one that is a marketer herself, I know our file sizes are large. You talked about videos and everything like that. So, has there been an adoption issue or just great receptivity that they have a secure way to, share their digital assets with each other, collaborate, and knowing that they're doing so, in a secure manner? So how's it been the receptivity from your end users?
Well, it's a mixed bag. Again, I hate to be sort of middle of the road on some of these responses like this, but it's hard to teach old dogs new tricks, as the saying goes, right? So you have those people who have in marketing and who deal with high resolution video and audio files and call recordings and those kind of things, or training, and there are certain groups that just love and are very excited to have a capability that can do this, and it's simple and easy, and it's using a email client and a web browser that they're all familiar with, and they know all of their external recipients or collaborators already have these technologies, so they're using a ubiquitous, well-known, distributed capability. They're just super elated to have a capability to share 500 gigs of data or 100 gigs of data or whatever file format and size that you have. So those are early adopters and very easy to work with. But then you have some of the more entrenched business processes and legacy applications and lots of volume and transactions, and they're used to old methods and old means, and it's a lot of stakeholders involved to change. And so they look at you like you're trying to sell them some snake oil or something, right? They're like, this is too good to be true, and it's going to be too hard to change. And so there's an uphill battle with that mentality. It's not an uphill battle technologically, but it's just kind of weird to have your security leader or team come to you and say, there's a cheaper, better, faster, simpler way to do this, and it's with email and a web browser, and people just kind of they don't know what to think at that point, right? It's like,
well, kind of defies some of the phishing things, right? I mean, out there, because they're told not to click on everything, and so we've done a great job of a lot of our users drilling that into their head, and now you're kind of sort of defying some of the things that they might have been fearful of.
Yeah, I think in many ways we've done too good a job at probably what wasn't a very bright thing, right? And we've coached our workforce into a scared corner that they can't get out of, and we can't actually convince them to come out now. The world has changed quite a bit with the cloud. If you just take a look at the advent of Microsoft Office Cloud Suite, O365, and that sort of thing, and they've changed everything into a linkable world. All this training about don't click on a link it was very skeptical at first as to the effectiveness of it, because people have to click on them, and even more so now in the world, and increasingly so going forward, because we're not going to keep pulling things down onto our devices. However, the browser and the email client is still probably the most ubiquitous and friendly and simple and comfortable tool that people have. Doesn't matter what industry you're in or what age group you're in, you know how to open a browser and go to a site, and you know how to click on a link, you know how to open an email and send an email. Those are things we don't have to train on. But we've scared people to the point of they're afraid to use the tools, and then when they go to try to use the tool, we've got so many constraints on them, like file sizes and file type limitations, this way in and that way out, but not that way. It's like I said before, I empathize with people on that front. But the world is changing, and we have new capabilities. And Nick was right. I mean, we're very good at things like what I call e-hostage, right? E-hostage is where we take your data that you own about you that we have, Instead of giving it to you or delivering it to you in e-delivery fashion, we put it up on one of our websites, and we put all these complicated user account creation, password creation, registration processes on the web front door. And we send you a hostage email and says, if you ever want to see your data alive again, you have to come through this gauntlet of registration and set up and navigate to it. And if you find it, you can have it. That's what I call e-hostage, and we're very good at that. And that's a terrible user experience. We know that from our customer feedback. This technology, with what we've done with eShare and rethinking this thing, totally shifts that around. And I would call it is somewhat of a philosophy of, if you can't beat them, join them, or maybe stated a little more positively, if we can't give them something better, then let's embrace what they already know and love. And that's what we're doing with the web browser and with email. We're just adding some cool things in the cloud, like O365 or Dropbox or Box or whatever it is that you might want to use as the hard drive in the cloud per se. And so that really changes things, and we can give new life to the browser and to email. The browser is really becoming more and more ubiquitous anyway, but email in particular, because they love it, and we're just going to embrace it. We just have to protect it. And I think that's what we're good at as security people, is finding a way to protect the things that people love to use and are productive with.
Well, we can't be saying the no. We've always been known as the no people. So I like the fact that you're thinking outside of the box and trying to help people, but do so in a more secure manner, Chuck. Perfect transition actually to our third topic today, which is email's role in file sharing and content collaboration, the future state. So Chuck, you did a good job of sort of thinking ahead, and I'm a huge fan of the idea of always telling our viewers here what to be thinking about 3 to 6, 9 months down the road, because we've got to be, as security executives and professionals, we have to be the visionaries as well. So, I'd like to ask Patrick, what do you think the role of email changing to evolve in your organization's external file sharing, content collaboration requirements really means for you guys? And, would you want all the emails leaving your organization to be processed as secure mail? And is that even practical?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think certainly from what we've seen with COVID and sort of this virtual office environment, traveling and carbon emissions have gone down, which I think is great. But the use of our collaboration suites, email and the likes have skyrocketed. So, which I guess is great from a productivity, but not so great from an inbox perspective. So I think, we're definitely seeing more and more use of collaboration tools like Teams and so on, where they're embedding files and communication in groups and sort of collaboration suites like that, and doing live editing and so on in some of those tools. So I think we'll continue to see that adoption go up. And I think more and more it will become more seamless of, you won't really know the difference of what an email is versus, what you upload into a browser and so on. So I think it will just naturally, get easier from that standpoint, to where it is almost seamless to the user of what's behind it in the technology standpoint. And that's where I agree with Chuck, that I think it's our jobs to work behind the scenes to make it seamless, make it easy. People are just trying to collaborate and work faster and exchange information. So it's our job to secure all of that, because, it can be the one email or the one upload, that has a massive impact to your company, an accidental data leak, or, allowing a threat actor into your environment. So I think to answer the question, I think I think we need to move where it's all, you assume it's secure by default. And I think that's kind of our roles as security professionals, to kind of build that in to what our teams are working with.
Well, thank you, Patrick. Nick, you've kind of already been doing this as reimagining secure email solutions for quite some time. And, you've talked about what that might look like, but, obviously, like an artist, what would be your ideal secure email solution? And is it possible to really achieve that in the overall future? We can't hear you again.
Sorry. I think so. I think the technology is there, as both Chuck and Patrick have mentioned. It's a matter of sort of making sure that the adoption and the adoption approach is such that it can be embraced easily by users. And I think this is where email is probably one of the biggest opportunities for folks, because it's already there and people are already used to using it. And that's sort of the reality of it. So And in the perfect world, a user does nothing different, right? As far as they're concerned, they just do an email as they normally do. They have a very natural user experience. They don't necessarily even realize that something's happening in the background, and nor should they know and care, quite frankly, from my point of view. The system should just do the right thing for them. And just as important as the recipient experience, which people have always hated from secure mail's point of view, is the recipient should have a very positive, simple experience from their point of view. And again, especially in mobile, I think this is the part that most people forget. You know, depending on what number you believe, 70 to 80% of all emails today are read on mobile platforms, right? So making sure that you're not only optimizing for the desktop experience, but really you have to make sure you're optimizing for the mobile experience, whether it's a phone or a tablet or whatever the case may be, taking into account the screen size, taking into account, you know, limited bandwidth potentially situations in terms of what you have in those scenarios, taking into account that, you know, you may be anywhere, well, not with the pandemic, but someday when this is over, you could be anywhere in the globe traveling. It always has to work. And that's the advantage of email, is that it's always working, it's always available. So as we look to secure these things, we can't sort of forget and forget about the usability aspect of it for the recipient. And many times, a lot of these tools, they were trying to make it easy for the sender, they were trying to make it easy for the organization that was buying it, but they wouldn't care that much about the recipient experience. And so we feel that it has to be balanced from a user experience point of view, plus there's got to be value. A simple example, right? You talked about large presentations, right? So if you're on a mobile experience and you're on a plane and you're going to receive that, you know, 50, 60, 70 megabyte PowerPoint that we've all gotten, you know, at times, and you're going to try to download it while you're on a plane. Remember, even though it's sitting in your email, you have to click on it, and the mail client, I don't care whether it's Windows or Android, Apple or Android, it's going to download that file on demand, and you have to first download the file and then view the file, which is a pain. But all you really want to do is just change the title document, right, for the next customer that you're going to go see in that environment. Well, if it's a link and you're not really downloading the document to your phone, but it's pushing a browser session, it's downloading the document to some backend system, opening it up into Office Online, only using the bandwidth required to open that one page that you need to see and edit, you know, on your phone or on your tablet, and then that's a lot more efficient, a lot better user experience. The viewers, for example, many times for documents are horrible. I mean, if it's a Word document, they're okay, but if it's an Excel spreadsheet, they're absolutely horrible. And if it's a PowerPoint file, half the time they work, half the time they don't. And so we're not only providing a more secure experience, but ideally you want to provide a better experience that happens to be secure, instead of a secure experience that happens to be okay.
Perfect. Well, you know, I'm going to ask Chuck, because you kind of alluded to this in your earlier point, with sort of the, you know, your end user population is sort of mixed, and there's probably some more security awareness that has to happen. But I'd also be curious what kind of feedback you're getting on the security controls, and how maybe the security team can partner with your end users. And you seem to be a great champion of doing that, and I think that's very admirable, you know, overall. So, you know, if you could just sort of put your wish list on, what would you tell Nick and crew about some things to add in the future that you'd like to see for your folks? Oh, Chuck, you have us on mute too.
I'm on mute. I committed the mute sin, right? Yeah, I think we're constantly collaborating with new features and stuff, and so it's one of the things I really like about working with Nick over the years, and you know, the rapid exchange or iteration of ideas. But you know, our users really are about simplicity and speed, and just you know, making things easy, right? And what we've learned is the people that use the tool like the fact that they don't have to know a lot of security or think a lot about security, right? It's essentially comes down to, and I know this sounds crazy, but it really does come down to how many clicks or how many keystrokes do they have to do when they're doing an email or even a web share to make that external collaboration happen. How difficult is, how much friction is in the process? Once they see that it's a one click away and then the send button from a normal email, that just kind of blows them over, and they're like, well, this is awesome, right? And then they just start using it. Now, you asked a question earlier, which I think is interesting, and Nick and I have talked at length about this. If you can make the user experience for the sender, and just thinking about email for a moment, if we can make the user experience for the sender of an email to do external collaboration securely, that they love that experience, and we can make the recipient experience so simple and easy that they also don't mind or can't even really notice that experience, then why wouldn't we drive as many communications that has any kind of volume of content at all in it from email? Why would we drive that through the process and just make that the normal process? And a unsecured email would become an abnormality, right? In an ecosystem where you're regulated or you have sensitive data, or you really are concerned about your operational state, right? Malware comes in through email, malware gets distributed through email. So it goes both ways on allowing a malicious or unauthorized outsider on the inside. So if you step back for a moment to say, let's flip the equation and make the secure communication collaboration the default behavior. And now you've done more than you could ever do with education in terms of lowering your risk posture and maintaining a better collaboration environment for your internal and external collaborations. Most of the things that we use today, like Office 365, MS Teams, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, we in our world have disabled the external sharing and the guest access. We don't allow that because there's so many gaps, and that adds so much risk for both malware in and out and data content leakage or mass data breaches that we've turned that off. So we're moving to this point of drawing everything down to the channels of egress and ingress that the users actually love, and we're making those secure enough, if I can use that phrase, not perfectly secure, but secure enough. But we're trying to flip the equation and make that the default practice, so we don't have to worry about adoption, because that's kind of selling somebody. It sounds like I'm selling you on something. But if I just make it the natural flow and the natural experience, I don't have to do adoption. Adoption is automatic for my culture, and trying to change the culture is the big game, I think, of a CISO to get in front of all of this risk.
I think a good analogy is you wouldn't buy or go in an automobile if it didn't have a seatbelt in there, and you feel secure by the fact that you put it on and you've been told to do so. In the same fashion here, if you're using a more secure email system, then it just becomes ubiquitous to the end user, and it just becomes natural because it wouldn't be questioned. Like I said, you get in a car and you don't see the seatbelt, then you're kind of not going to get in the car and go. We've got some great questions though that have just popped in the screen, so I'd like to share them with all of you and see where your thoughts are. Our first question is, will there be a need to refence the policy with the growing usage of technology of identify official communication? So A, email, B, email and collaboration, or C, both? Who would be able to answer that question for us? Nick, do you think you could answer that one for us? Or Chuck, did you want to tackle that?
Well, I'm not sure I caught the very first of that question. So.
I missed the first part of the question too.
It says, will there be a refence policy with the growing usage of technology to identify official communication? A, email, B, email and collaboration, C, both?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. I think if I'm interpreting the question correctly, but yes, it would totally change internal policies, right? Where we have a lot of training and awareness and teaching and coaching people that email is not secure. Email is like a postcard. In the snail mail world, anything you put in there is going to be read and copied, and all that kind of stuff along its journey from endpoint to endpoint. I think if we make it secure enough, we can go back to everybody and say the policy would change like this: don't use email for regulated content. To the preferred communication channel in general and collaboration is the email product, right? And in this whole solution of even in the web, because even in our environment, Outlook Web Access, which is the online version of Outlook in Microsoft O365 environment, runs in a browser, right? So it all feels like a browser to most of our people, whether it's email or just a normal web file share, file folder share, secure data room, those kind of things. But the policy would totally reverse. And the way that we would show that or demonstrate that with regulation is think of, I don't know, I'm trying to use a crazy analogy here, but think of a farmer with a sheep pen. And there's a lot of sheep in the pen, but the pen that he designed, this farmer, has 100,000 gates in it. And sheep can go in and go out of 100,000 gates. The farmer's got to track all of his sheep, and he has to hire enough people to man all the gates. And so he thinks this is going to cost me a fortune. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of 100,000 gates, and I'm going to close the pen in. I'm going to have one gate, and I'm going to have fewer people to watch that one gate, and I'm going to have a much smarter gate in and out. And now I can control my risk of losing a sheep or having a wolf get a sheep, and I can control the sheep flow much better. Email is that one gate, and the pen is the whole of your environment. If email is the way in and the way out, you can invest and instrument that email channel in a much more cost-effective way at a much more sophisticated manner, and you can lower your risk and expedite and simplify your collaboration all at the same time. So your policy would certainly, even from a regulatory standpoint, be supported to go in the other direction, because then and only then can you go back and shut down technologically all of these other gates that the sheep could go in and out of the pen, or the content can move in and out of your environment. And that would totally redefine policies and standards and training and your workflows. So I think it can be rewritten completely.
Thank you very much, Chuck. It's been a while since, this next question is, it's been a while since I looked at eShare, but are there some new things around DRM, also support for other applications like Box, and is it still required to have an agent on the assets? Nick, do you want to answer that quickly?
Sure. eShare has really refocused its efforts. eShare used to be called Encrypted Cloud. We used to do a lot of encryption. The thinking was that we would protect the data in the cloud. With O365 and G Suite, what we realized is that encryption to some degree is the enemy of the cloud. It doesn't allow for connecting using APIs. It doesn't allow for integration of third-party apps. And so we refocused essentially our data protection strategy, instead of around encrypting the data, into being able to provide a secure portal with all the functionality needed for viewing and editing and sort of so on and so forth. So the data doesn't have to be encrypted at rest in OneDrive or SharePoint or whatever, because we want users to be able to both natively access the data, as well as the external users to be able to access the same file with the same folder, the same series of information. So all of the IRM, DRM logic is now done server side, and the security perimeter is the pane of glass of the browser. So behind the browser, without having to download the file, you can view, you can edit, you can co-author, you can upload, you can sort of do whatever you need to do without needing to have the document sort of come down to the endpoint and then sort of losing visibility and control, unless you use something like a traditional sort of endpoint encryption technology.
Perfect, thank you. This question is particularly interesting. This may apply for a seasoned veteran workforce, but we have a whole new generation of workers coming into who rarely, if ever, email. As familiar as email is to a seasoned worker, is it just as foreign and not preferred by the younger workforce? So they like to post to social media and they text message. How can we port this thinking concept to apply better to our emerging workforce? I thought that was a pretty interesting question. Do you have any thoughts on that, Nick?
You know, I do. I mean, as much as things change and become modern and more frequent, people still, especially in sort of regulated corporations where things are locked down to some degree, they're kind of forced into using things like email because they're not allowed to use other mechanisms within that particular platform. The other part of the reality is that even though they may be comfortable with some of these technologies, the people they're collaborating with externally may not be comfortable with those technologies, or those organizations may not be allowing those technologies through. So especially when you're talking about external collaboration, it's not just what the initiator feels comfortable with, but it's what the recipient feels comfortable with as a user, but also the recipient as an organization and their risk stature. And so, from what I see today, I don't see companies, your organization may choose to embrace everything, but you know what? The banks aren't changing anytime soon. The health insurance companies aren't changing anytime soon. The insurance companies aren't changing anytime soon. and embracing sort of do anything you want, whenever you want, because they're all regulated. Or, you know, companies that have a high amount of IP, again, they're going to be locked down. So, you know, I think that even though the younger generation's coming in and they're used to using some of these more modern platforms, they're not going to be able to leverage them across organizations. The other part, which is what we're suggesting, is when, you know, when this young generation is used to Google Docs and they don't understand the concept of sending an actual file, or they may not like using Word or Excel or something along those lines because it doesn't have, you know, co-editing capabilities. That's just a given in a platform like Google Docs. Well, you know, Microsoft's done a great job. That's now available, right? The problem is that when you make that Word document an attachment instead of a link, you know, you can't take advantage of any of that technology outside of the organization, right, in terms of what's there. So part of what we're doing is trying to meet that younger generation that's used to, you know, having all of these capabilities in this sort of link-based environment that they're used to, and continuing that to the corporate environment, which is mainly, I mean, the reality is it's mainly based on Microsoft platforms and mainly based on O365, to let those sort of legacy platforms now support that type of usage that you know, younger generation takes for given.
Thank you,
I'll
Nick.
just maybe add to that real quickly, Nick, to say
Okay.
that we're all coming together in the cloud, and I don't know too many folks, even the younger generation. I have preteen grandkids, I have early 20s children, and you know, they like mobile, they like apps, but they all are very comfortable with a browser, and they can throw that browser around pretty quickly. They generally have Gmail or some other kind of technology that complements these. There are just certain things you can't do without going to a browser, whether that's Dropbox or Box or OneDrive or G Drive or any number of file types, any number of file functions. You know, there's just certain things you can't do even on a mobile device. And so I think there's this notion that email is sort of passé and not used, but when you really get down to the nitty gritty and you need to get a document or a folder or something really done in the real world, you have to then go to the right kind of client, which is the browser, and you have to go to the right kind of place, which is the cloud, and you have to get it done. And so I think there's a long life ahead of us here when it comes to this browser-based, cloud-based collaboration meeting point.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. It was a great session. I want to thank everybody for joining us at our ISE Fireside Webinar. I hope that you'll save some dates coming up. We have ISE Central on September 2nd. We have ISE West on August 20th. And we also have the ISE Northeast deadline for August 14th. So submit those nominations, and we also hope that you'll submit a nomination for ISE North America on September 25th as well. Don't forget to fill out your surveys, and you give us your information on the CPs, and we'll send you back the information so you can make that deposit. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate eShare, and we appreciate Chuck and Patrick and Nick for being our panelists today. Have a wonderful afternoon and stay healthy and safe, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Marci, and your team for pulling this together for us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.